Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires. In this video, we shall talk on Clan Nosferatu. Nosferatu, the clan of the hidden, the clan of monsters. Very few vampires evoke such fear at first glance than Clan Nosferatu, and that is because of their infamous reputation. After all, their countenances are something to behold, or something not to behold if you have a weak stomach. For when a Nosferatu is embraced, his visage is warped, his body is racked with pain, and when he awakens, and it can take hours, it can take several nights, he is something that he was not when he was mortal. Maybe he awakens with a hunchback, and teeth that protrude at painful angles, eyes sunken into the back of his head, hair falling off in clumps out of his scalp. Maybe his fingers have grown unnaturally long. Perhaps his nose has given way, leaving a cavernous, bloody chasm in the middle of his face. Maybe he has fingernails growing down his cheeks in a rather disgusting kind of look. His eyes constantly askew, they can never look in the same direction. His legs now bowed, he can't even walk properly. And, of course, he looks like a monster. He has to be a monster. How can anything that looks like that be anything other than a monster? What the vampires that think this do not consider is that the Nosferatu are some of the most intelligent, some of the most resourceful, some of the most canny vampires in the final nights. It is all too easy to write off a vampire for its disgusting appearance, and yet the Nosferatu have webs of manipulation, they have webs of information, and in fact they have a website of information on ShrekNet, a forum-based interface with which members of the clan, whether in the Camarilla or the Sabbat, can communicate with each other, often to warn themselves against the incoming Niktuku. Who are the Niktuku? Well, that takes me back to the start. Nosferatus first emerged when a vampire known as Absimiliard embraced his childer. Absimiliard, a vain hunter, embraced by Zilla the Beautiful of the second generation, or so they say, was so enraged when his face was scarred whilst hunting that Zilla herself cursed him to hideous ugliness, cursed him to not play on aesthetics so severely, to not take his appearance so seriously, and yet he could think of nothing worse than looking like a monster, so Zilla made him even worse, even more ugly, and Cain joined in. It is said, if you believe some Nosferatu, that Absimiliard was bullied and tortured and abused by his elders as an abject life lesson. Was that fair? Probably not, especially as Absimiliard was immortal and would have to live with these changes forever and ever and ever. And far from being the brave hunter, he became a reclusive, paranoid, dangerous, insipid coward that would dwell in the hidden, darkest spots of the earth. Some say in the Antarctic, some say at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Wherever Absimiliard is, he is something that is so alien and so foreign looking that no one could look upon him and maintain their sanity. Either way, Absimiliard did embrace at one point during his gradual devolution, and, well, I say at one point, at multiple points, and each of those childer embraced in turn, except Absimiliard, in his paranoia, decided the only way he could make it up to Cain, the only way he could get his beauty back, the only way that he could be forgiven by his sire and his sire's sire, despite the fact that Zilla had long since met her final death, but no one said that Absimiliard was entirely sane to begin with, was to slay all of his childish childer, all of his childish childer, essentially to bring everything back to the source. He knew that Cain had never wanted this many vampires roving around on the earth. Quite the contrary, Cain had never intended to embrace, and he especially never intended for his childer to embrace. So when he found out that the antediluvians had embraced countless childer themselves, Cain was irate. Some say that is why he cursed the founders of the clans in the first place. Still, Absimiliard decided that the best way to make it up to Cain would be to wipe out his clan systematically. When this was, none can say. It was so far back in time and clearly unsuccessful, as Nosferatu creep around in every city on the globe these nights, and if you don't believe me, just stare at that shadow for a couple of minutes and you might just see something move out of the corner of your eye. So he sent his childer, those childer that he loved, some of which were supposedly not as monstrous as he, out to slay their descendants. His childer being fanatically bloodbound to him, and he, by this point, was no doubt a tentacled, amorphous blob of a creature, served him willingly. These Niktuku, as they were dubbed, were monsters beyond any other, that went around the world slaying Nosferatu left, right and centre, occasionally disappearing into myth and legend, only to reappear again at some other time, some other place, to slay an entire city's contingent of Nosferatu. One of these members of the 4th or 5th generation, depending on who you ask, was Baba Yaga, where the tales of the Russian witch huts come from. Baba Yaga herself was a Nosferatu and, some say, a member of the Niktuku. And this is why very few Nosferatu dwell in Soviet Russia, or modern day Russia, or modern night Russia. Where are the Nosferatu now then, if they have spent generations being hunted by their elders? Well, the Nosferatu are nothing if not a resilient clan. It is said that when Gehenna comes, the Nosferatu will be the first ones under the ground. While it has been misinterpreted at some point that means the Nosferatu will be the first to meet final death, that is not what it means at all. It just means that they will always know when danger is coming, and just like rats leaving a sinking ship, the Nosferatu will get away from danger as soon as it rears its very ugly head, and yet still not as ugly as the Nosferatus. The Nosferatu, with their intricate networks of information, have always been on top of the game. They are always aware of what's going on. That isn't to say that every single member of the Nosferatu is an information broker, a hacker, a journalist, or something like that, but there has to be a way for a Nosferatu to gain the upper hand against other vampires. How can a Nosferatu command respect or fear if all he ever does is show his ugly face in Elysium? He has to have something to offer, and the best kind of thing for someone to offer who cannot show his face in public is secrets, hidden information. You would be surprised at the number of princes who have had their reigns cut short because a Nosferatu has leaked a certain amount of information about them, about that child that they embraced, about that other vampire that they diablerized to get to their position. Nosferatu make themselves indispensable. It would be all too easy to say, these spies are bringing down the Camarilla with their constant backchat, with their constant talk that causes fractures throughout the organisation, and yet they are very, very useful, because so many vampires rely on them for this hidden knowledge that they can't just dismiss them. They can't just tell them to go join the Sabbat. They can't just wipe them out by calling a blood hunt on them. The Nosferatu are all over the place, and indeed they would be very quick to organise and get the hell out of Dodge if the rest of the vampires in the city were after all of them. Now, it does not say that every Nosferatu belongs to the Camarilla either. There are Nosferatu anti-tribu in the Sabbat, monstrous beings who often eschew the use of obfuscate, and rightly so, some Nosferatu say. After all, obfuscate, just as their ugliness, was given to them by Cain. And do they want either? Do they want anything from Cain? Do they want anything from their clan founder? When the clan founder is what resulted in their looking so disgusting, what resulted in their having such a hideous countenance, why would they want to use his gifts? And so, the Nosferatu use gifts borrowed from other clans, supposedly animalism, to control the rats that seek the information out for them. They control bugs, in some cases bees and cockroaches. They can get beetles to burrow into the heads of people and eat through the brain. Not only that, but they have this strength of Charles Atlas with potence to spare. They are one of the fiercest clans, and while they do not have protein and they cannot sprout claws, they may well already have claws that are covered in grime and gunk from the sewers. So when they scratch you, if you're a mortal, you're likely to come away with typhoid, if nothing else. I don't even know if typhoid is a blood-borne contagion, but you get the general idea. The Nosferatu are one of my favourite clans because there's a hell of a lot of diversity you can have as a Nosferatu. You do not have to play the reclusive, geeky Nosferatu who hides in a chamber off of the sewers, accumulating information, spying on others. You can play a hard-headed Nosferatu who likes to engage in battles. You can play a charismatic Nosferatu. Just because you have an ugly face does not mean you cannot be socially manipulative, does not mean you can be socially persuasive. And indeed some Nosferatu are very charming indeed, because before their embrace they were actors, or they were journalists, and so they know how to get answers out of people. But my point is, the Nosferatu do not have to be from a set background. Just as Clan Malkavian has a very diverse clan, so does Clan Nosferatu. It is very rare for a Nosferatu to embrace another Nosferatu just because they are already ugly, or because they are beautiful. It is always because they have something that the clan needs, or, on occasion, what the sire needs. And what does a sire need if not resources? The Nosferatu are a practical and pragmatic clan. They know when to get out of the burning building. But likewise they can be loyal, they can stick together, pun intended, and they are often loyal to the other clans that are quite often given a bad rap, whether it be Clan Malkavian, Clan Gangrel, or others. The Nosferatu, while being seen as lepers, can also be firm companions and allies, and the most reliable vampires to get you out of a tricky spot, providing it isn't detrimental to them at the same time. I don't like to make casual generalisations about someone's motivations and someone being more reliable than another, but when you spend an existence being persecuted, years, maybe decades being persecuted for being the most hideous monster around, when one vampire shows you kindness, you are likely to repay that kindness, or at least question why he's being so friendly. And when you see another vampire being persecuted for his madness, or for his increasingly being in touch with his beast, then maybe you are more likely to share a goblet of blood with that vampire in order to find out about his woes and plan the destruction of the Ventru and Toreador and Tremere in charge of the city, so that you, the Gangrel and the Malkavian, can rise up and bring it back to where it should rightfully be, in the hands of those who know the true reins of power. That is my video on Clan Nosferatu. Remember, check the shadows for these deviant bastards, because they can be hiding in plain sight quite happily. Thank you very much for watching.